The signal came from the edge of the Cathara system, weak and broken, like the last breath of a dying star. It traveled through the dark and the cold for 11 light hours before any receiver picked it up. When the Galactic Union's relay station at Outpost Yenar caught the transmission, the operators on duty went still. They had seen distress signals before, but this one was different. It was a Velthari ship. The Velthari were not the kind of people who sent distress signals. The Velthari were old, older than most civilizations in the Union. Their empire stretched across 42 star systems and had stood for 6,000 years. They were tall and calm and slow to speak, and they had never once in recorded history asked anyone for help. They were the kind of people who gave help. They were the kind of people who showed up when others called. So when their signal came in, broken and desperate and full of static, every operator in that relay station felt a chill that had nothing to do with temperature. The message was short. It said, "All ships in range. This is the Velthari fleet carrier Sunspear. We are under attack. We cannot hold. We are requesting immediate assistance. Sending coordinates. Please respond." Then it repeated, and repeated, and repeated. Commander Esha, of the Union diplomatic frigate Calm Waters, was the first to respond. She was a Pelvari, a small gray-skinned species from a water world, and she had spent 30 years in deep space working as a liaison officer. She had seen wars. She had seen disasters. She had talked down 3 different border conflicts in her career. She was not easy to shake. She was shaking now. The Sunspear was a fleet carrier. It carried 400 crew members and 22 fighter craft. It was one of the largest ships in the Velthari military, and someone was taking it apart. Esha opened a channel to all Union vessels in the system. She gave the coordinates. She asked for any ship that could respond to move now. Then she turned her own ship toward the signal and pushed the engines as hard as they would go. What she found when she arrived was a graveyard. 3 Velthari destroyers were gone. Just gone. Not destroyed, not drifting, gone. The Sunspear itself was still there, but it was barely holding together. Half its hull plating had been torn away. Its engines were dark. It rotated slowly in space, like something that had given up trying to fight gravity. Around it floated chunks of metal and frozen gas, and things that Esha did not want to look at too closely. And the attackers were still there. She had never seen ships like them. They were long and black and smooth, shaped like needles, and they moved through space the way a shark moved through water, with total confidence, without waste, without hesitation. There were 9 of them. They were circling the Sunspear slowly, like they were deciding what to do with it. Esha hailed them. No response. She hailed again. Nothing. She tried 17 different frequencies. Silence. Then one of the needle ships turned toward the calm waters. She moved her ship back fast. The needle ship followed. It did not fire. It just moved toward her, slow and steady, like it had all the time in the world and she was going nowhere. Her science officer, a young Dravathi named Pol, was scanning the attackers as fast as the instruments allowed. He looked up from his console with wide eyes and said, "Commander, their hull material doesn't match anything in our database. Their propulsion is, I don't understand what I'm looking at. Their weapons, they didn't fire on the Sunspear. Those destroyers weren't destroyed by weapons fire." "Then what happened to them?" Esha asked. Paul looked at his screen for a long moment. "I think they were eaten," he said. That was when Esha sent her own distress signal. She broadcast it on every frequency the calm waters had. She sent it to every Union outpost and relay within range. She sent it to every fleet and station and listening post and diplomatic hub she could reach. She also sent it to Earth. She had not planned to do that. The humans were a new member species. They had been in the Union for only 40 years. They were small and strange, and everyone in the Union still wasn't quite sure what to make of them. They were not a major military power by any standard. They did not have the largest fleet. They did not have the most advanced weapons. They had a habit of doing things that no other species would think to do, for reasons no one else fully understood. But Esha sent the signal to Earth anyway, not because she thought it would help. She sent it because she was scared. And when she was scared, she wanted as many people as possible to know what was happening. She did not know that this decision would change everything. On Earth, in the city of Nairobi, In the headquarters of the United Earth Defense Command, a woman named Admiral Yuka Osei Mensa was in a meeting about budget allocations when her comm unit lit up. She excused herself, stepped into the hall, and read the message. She read it twice. Then she went back into the meeting room, closed her folder, and said, "We need to stop. Something has come up." She did not tell them what it was. Not yet. She needed to make some calls first. She called the captain of the UED's carrier Relentless, which was currently on a training exercise in the outer system. She called the commanders of the 3 destroyer groups assigned to Earth's second defensive ring. She called the captain of the experimental vessel Prometheus, which was technically still in trials, but which she had quietly decided was ready for real work. She called her old friend, General Taro Vasquez, who ran the 7th Rapid Deployment Brigade, and told him to wake up his people and get them moving. She did not tell any of them what they were going to face. She did not know yet herself. But she looked at the data that came with Esha's signal, the sensor readings, the hull material analyses, the weapon signatures that weren't weapon signatures, and she felt something that she recognized from a very long time ago. She felt it the way a human being feels things, not just in the mind, but in the stomach, in the chest, in the back of the throat. It was the feeling of something ancient and predatory being near. It was the feeling of a problem that would not be solved by talking. She had learned, over a long career, that some problems needed talking, and some problems needed a different approach entirely. She started building the fleet response package in her head before she even got back to her desk. Back in the Cathara system, the situation was getting worse. 2 more Union ships had responded to Esha's call. A Dravathi patrol cruiser named the Iron Shore had arrived, and immediately been driven back by one of the Needle ships. A Velthari rescue shuttle had come out of the Sunspear's damaged bay and been swatted out of space before it got 50 kilometers away. The Needle ships were not talking. They were not demanding anything. They were not making any kind of communication at all. They were just there, moving, circling, occasionally reaching out with something that was not a weapon but did things that weapons did. The Velthari on the Sunspear were running out of air. 3 of their life support sectors had been destroyed. The emergency reserves would last maybe 20 more hours. The crew was still alive. The Needle ships seemed to want them alive, which was somehow worse than if they hadn't, but they were helpless. Esha kept her ship at a distance and kept broadcasting. She updated her distress signal every hour with new data. She recorded everything her sensors picked up. She noted every movement the Needle ships made, every pattern, every behavior. She was a diplomat, not a soldier, but she understood that what she was doing was important. She was witnessing something that the Union had never seen before. She was also, quietly and privately, trying not to think about the word her science officer had used. Eaten. 42 hours after the first signal left the Cathara system, Esha's sensors picked up something new. Something coming in from the edge of the system. Fast. Too fast. Faster than anything she had seen. She looked at the contact report and blinked. Then she looked again. Multiple contacts. Large contacts. Moving at a speed that her instruments said was impossible, but her instruments were clearly measuring anyway. She opened a hailing channel, not sure what she expected. Then the response came back, and it was in Standard Union Common, spoken with the particular flat vowels and direct rhythm that she had come to recognize as the human way of speaking. This is Admiral Yuka Osei Mensa, of the United Earth Defense Command. We received your signal. We are on approach. Please transmit full sensor data of hostile contacts. ETA to your position. 90 minutes. Do not engage. We are coming. Esha sat in her command chair and felt something she had not felt in 2 days. She felt like things might be okay. She did not know yet what the humans had brought with them. She did not know what Admiral Osei Mensa had decided when she looked at those sensor readings and felt that old predatory feeling. She did not know what the United Earth Defense Command had sent racing across the dark to answer her call. But 90 minutes later, she would find out. And so would the Needle ships. The Needle ships noticed the new contacts at the same time Esha did. They stopped circling the Sunspear. For the first time in 2 days, they were still, all 9 of them, hanging in space like dark splinters against the stars, their smooth hulls reflecting nothing. They were pointed toward the edge of the system, waiting, watching. Esha watched them watching. She had her science officer recording everything. She had her communications officer keeping the channel to the incoming humans open. She had her pilot ready to move in any direction at any moment. She herself sat in her command chair and did not move, and tried very hard to breathe normally. The humans came in fast. They came in so fast that Esha's sensors had trouble tracking them cleanly. The resolution kept blurring. The computer kept updating the contact count and the contact sizes as more and more data came in. What had started as a handful of contacts became a formation. What had been a formation became a fleet. When the resolution finally cleared, Esha counted. And she counted again. She called her science officer over and made him count too. He came up with the same number she did, 53 vessels. The humans had sent 53 vessels. There was the carrier, large and gray and flat-topped, bristling with weapons emplacements and launch bays. There were 12 destroyers arranged around it, in a pattern she didn't recognize, but which her tactical instincts told her was very good. There were 8 cruisers, heavier than she expected from a species of Earth's size and age. There were smaller ships, corvettes and frigates and things that didn't quite match any classification she knew, filling in the gaps of the formation like water filling a container. And ahead of all of them, running point like the tip of a spear, was a single vessel she had no category for at all. It was dark, not black like space, but dark the way deep water is dark, absorbing light rather than reflecting it. It was angular and strange, all hard edges and jutting structures, and it moved like it was alive, adjusting course constantly in small, quick ways, as if it was reading the space around it and responding. Her instruments said it was about 300 meters long. Her instruments also said several things about it that she didn't entirely believe, so she stopped reading the instruments for a moment and just looked at it. Admiral Ose Mensa's voice came over the channel. "Commander Esha, we have visual on the hostiles. Do not move your ship. We need you to stay clear of the engagement zone. Can you confirm the Sunspear crew is still alive?" "Confirmed," Esha said. "Approximately 400 crew. Life support is failing. They have maybe 18 hours. The hostiles appear to have no interest in destroying them. They seem to want them alive. I don't know why." A brief pause. "Understood. We'll keep that in mind. Please stand by." The needle ships moved first. 3 of them broke away from the group and accelerated toward the incoming human fleet. They moved fast, faster than most ships Esha had seen, and they moved with the same fluid confidence they had shown since the beginning. They did not hesitate. They had destroyed 3 Velthari destroyers and disabled a fleet carrier. Esha suspected they did not see much reason to be afraid of anyone. What happened next happened very quickly. The dark ship at the front of the human formation, the angular, light-absorbing one, did something that Esha's instruments recorded but that she could not immediately explain. It emitted a field, not a weapon, not a shield. A field that spread out around the 3 incoming needle ships and then compressed. 2 of the needle ships stopped moving, just stopped, like they had been grabbed by an invisible hand and held in place. The third one broke away from the field somehow, spun, and fired at the dark ship. Whatever it fired was not something Esha had seen before, a ripple of something that distorted the space it passed through. The dark ship moved. It moved fast enough that the ripple passed through where it had been, and kept going into empty space. Then the dark ship did something Esha's pilot called, quietly and mostly to himself, absolutely insane. It went toward the needle ship, not away, toward. The needle ship fired again. The dark ship rolled, actually rolled, like an atmospheric aircraft, in the hard vacuum of space, and the shot went wide. Then the dark ship was alongside the needle ship, and something came out of it. Boarding craft. Small, fast, armored. 6 of them, launching from bays along the dark ship's flank, and hitting the needle ship's hull before it could do anything to stop them. The Star had never seen anyone try to board one of those things. She had not thought it was possible. She watched, speechless, as the boarding craft cut through the needle ship's hull like it was paper. Behind the dark ship, the rest of the human fleet was engaging the remaining 6 needle ships. It was not a clean fight. It was not a one-sided fight. The needle ships were fast and they hit hard, and whatever they used instead of weapons was just as effective against human ships as it had been against the Velthari. 2 human corvettes were destroyed in the first exchange. A cruiser took damage that Esha could see from her position. Whole sections of its hull buckled and went dark. But the humans did not slow down. They did not pull back. They had a thing that Esha had heard other species mention but had never quite believed was real. She had thought it was an exaggeration, a story told about a young and strange species to make them seem more interesting. She had thought it was the kind of thing that became legend, because the truth was more complicated and less dramatic. She was no longer sure it was an exaggeration. The humans fought like they enjoyed it. Not in the way that some warrior cultures fought, with ritual and formality, and a code of honor that shaped how the battle went. The humans fought the way their world had apparently produced things for billions of years, with total commitment, with adaptation, with a complete absence of the self-preservation instinct that made most species pull back when things got bad. When the needle ships hit them, they hit back harder. When 2 needle ships focused on 1 human vessel, 3 human vessels focused on 1 needle ship. They communicated constantly, their tactical network updating in real time, the formation shifting and adapting as fast as the battle demanded. The 2 needle ships that the dark ship had caught in its field were still held. Whatever was keeping them in place was still keeping them. Esha watched a human destroyer pull up alongside one of them and simply start cutting it open, methodical and unhurried, while the battle raged around them. Admiral Ose Mensa's voice came over the channel again. "Commander Esha, I need you to get as close to the Sunspear as you safely can and start relaying life support data to our medical vessels. We'll have a team to you shortly." "Understood," Esha said. She looked at her pilot. He was already moving. She kept watching the battle as they moved. She had sensors on everything. She was recording everything. Later, she would spend a long time reviewing the recordings, trying to understand what she was seeing. For now, she just watched. One of the needle ships broke away from the main engagement. It was the fastest of them, and it moved in a way that suggested it was trying to escape. It headed for open space, accelerating hard, and for a moment, it looked like it might make it. 3 human vessels broke off to chase it. They were not faster. The needle ship was faster. But the humans didn't seem to need to be faster. 2 of them went wide, and the third went wide in the other direction, and Esha watched them somehow calculate, where the needle ship was going to go, not where it was. They cut it off at a point in space that it had not reached yet. When it got there, they were waiting. The needle ship tried to turn. The humans did something with their gravity drives. Esha's instruments could barely track it, and the needle ship tumbled, its course broken, and the 3 human vessels were on it before it could recover. The battle lasted 47 minutes from first contact to last. When it was over, 7 of the 9 needle ships were captured or disabled. 1 had been destroyed, not by human weapons but by what appeared to be a self-destruct. 1 had escaped. The humans had let it go, which struck Esha as deliberate rather than accidental, though she did not yet understand why. The Sunspear was still intact. 400 Velthari crew members were still alive. Human medical vessels were already moving toward it, their airlocks cycling open, their crews suited up and ready. Esha set her ship alongside the Sunspear and opened a channel to the ship inside. A Velthari voice came back, tired and shaky, and deeply, profoundly grateful. She told them help was coming. She told them to hold on a little longer. Then she looked at the dark ship, which had stopped moving, and was now sitting in space among the wreckage of needle ships, and was doing nothing at all, patient and angular and quiet. She requested a channel to Admiral Ose Mensa. "Admiral," she said, when the connection opened, "may I ask, the vessel at the front of your formation, the dark one, what is it?" A pause. "That's the Prometheus," the Admiral said. "Experimental design. We've been working on it for a while. First real test. It performed well," Esha said. "Yes," the Admiral agreed. There was something in her voice that might have been pride, or might have been something more complicated. "It did." "And the boarding action," Esha said. "The crews that went onto the needle ships. Are they?" "All accounted for," the Admiral said. "We have some injuries. No fatalities from the boarding. We lost 2 corvettes in the main engagement, 12 crew total. We're still getting full damage reports." Esha thought about 12. She thought about what the needle ships had done to the Velthari before the humans arrived. 3 destroyers gone entirely. Dozens of crew on the Sunspear dead from hull breaches and life support failures. "Admiral," she said, "the Velthari are going to want to speak with you." "I expected that," the Admiral said. "Set it up whenever you're ready. But first, the needle ships we captured. I want to know what they are and where they came from. Your science people and ours should start on that immediately. I let one go on purpose. I want it to go home and report what happened here." Esha blinked. "You want them to know what happened?" "I want whoever sent them to know," the Admiral said simply. "Information is important. I want to make sure they have accurate information." She didn't elaborate. She didn't have to. Esha was a diplomat, and she understood communication very well, and she understood exactly what the Admiral was communicating. She was not just sending a message to the species that had built the needle ships. She was sending a message to everyone who might be watching. The news spread through the Galactic Union the way all news spread, slowly at first, then all at once. It started with official reports. The Velthari High Command received the battle data from Commander Esha within 6 hours of the engagement's end. Their response was measured and formal, as everything the Velthari did was measured and formal. Acknowledgement of the human assistance, expressions of gratitude, a request for full sensor logs. Behind closed doors, in rooms that Esha did not have access to, there were apparently other conversations, louder ones. She heard this secondhand from a Velthari communications officer who was not entirely as discreet as his species prided itself on being. The Dravathi heard about it next. They had the Iron Shore's sensor data, and the Iron Shore had been close enough to catch parts of the battle on its instruments before it had been pushed back. What the Dravathi saw in that data made their scientific community very excited, and their military community very quiet. Then the relay stations picked it up, and the news traders, and the diplomatic services, and within 3 days there was not a species in the Union that had not heard some version of what had happened in the Cathara system. The versions varied considerably. Some of them were close to accurate. Some of them were not close at all. There were versions that said the humans had arrived with 1,000 ships, or that the needle ships had been some kind of rogue AI, or that the battle had lasted days rather than minutes. There was a version, popular in some of the outer systems, that the humans had simply talked the needle ships into surrendering, which was flatly wrong, but which said something interesting about what some species believed humans were capable of. What all the versions had in common, the accurate ones and the exaggerated ones and the completely made-up ones, was the essential core of the event. Something very dangerous had attacked a Velthari carrier, and the humans had shown up and stopped it. For many species in the Union, this required some adjustment. The humans had been a curiosity for 40 years. A young species, a late addition to the Union, interesting in the specific way that new members always were. Their history was strange, their biology was unusual, their psychology was hard to read, and they had a tendency to make decisions that seemed irrational until you understood their reasoning, at which point the reasoning made a kind of sense that was somehow more unsettling than the irrationality had been. They were also from a world that every xenobiologist who had visited it described in terms that made other species not want to visit it. Earth was not a gentle planet. Earth had been producing dangerous things for so long that everything on it, down to the smallest life forms, had developed mechanisms for surviving, defending, and, if necessary, destroying threats. The humans had evolved at the top of that pile, which meant they had evolved in an environment of constant pressure, constant danger, and constant adaptation. Most Union species came from worlds where the biggest predators were manageable, where disease was something you could avoid, where natural disasters were rare enough that civilization could develop in relative peace. Earth was not that kind of world. Earth was the kind of world that sharpened everything it produced. People had known this, in an abstract sense, for 40 years. They had looked at human history and human biology and human behavior, and they had noted, with academic interest, that this was a species that had come from somewhere hard. The battle at Kethera was not abstract. Ambassador Veth of the Pelosian Republic was one of the first senior diplomats to formally request a meeting with the human delegation at Union headquarters. The Pelosians were an old and careful species, known for thinking through everything twice before acting. Ambassador Veth had been in his position for 20 years, and had seen many things change in the Union. He requested the meeting because he wanted to understand what had changed now. The human ambassador to the Union was a woman named Carolyn Adeyemi. She was 60 years old, with white hair cut short, and a way of sitting in her chair that suggested she was comfortable in it. She had been in her position for 8 years. She had not been at Cathara. She had been at Union headquarters when the battle happened, following it through the data feeds like everyone else. She received Ambassador Veth in her office and offered him tea, which was a human custom he had learned to expect, and which he actually appreciated. "I want to understand something," Veth said, after they had talked around the subject for a while, in the way that diplomats do. The response, the speed of it, the scale of it. Admiral Osei Mensa had the fleet moving before the full picture was clear. "Yes," Carolyn said. 53 vessels, Veth said. The Union emergency response to the Dravathi border crisis 6 years ago, which was a larger and more complex situation in many ways, involved 31 vessels, and it took 4 days to assemble. "We were closer," Carolyn said. "Your nearest vessel was 9 light hours from the signal origin," Veth said. He had done the math. "The response time suggests you began moving before the signal finished transmitting." Carolyn looked at him over her tea. She had a way of looking at people that was patient and direct at the same time. "Ambassador Veth," she said, "we have been in the Union for 40 years. In that time, we have had access to Union communication networks, Union scientific data, Union historical records. We have studied every conflict the Union has experienced in the last 200 years. We have been paying attention." "To what, specifically?" "To everything," she said, "but specifically to the edges, the places where the Union's knowledge runs thin, the systems we don't know much about, the signals that were hard to explain, the ships that went missing without clear cause." She set down her cup. "We had been watching the outer edges of the Cathara system for about a year. The needle ships. We didn't know what they were, but we knew something was there. Admiral Osei Mensa had contingency plans." Veth was quiet for a moment. "You were preparing," he said, "without informing the Union." "We were paying attention," Carolyn said again. There was a very slight difference in those two things, and she was making it clear that she understood the difference. "We would have brought our concerns to the Union Council if they had solidified into something concrete. They solidified faster than we expected. We acted with what we had." Veth thought about this. The Pelosians were a species that liked information to be shared, categorized and distributed through proper channels. The idea of a member species conducting its own quiet intelligence assessment of potential threats without reporting to the Council was not technically against any rule, but it was the kind of thing that made other diplomats uncomfortable. "The captured vessels," he said, "the interrogation of their crews, if there were crews, the analysis of their technology. This will be shared with the Union fully?" "Completely," Carolyn said. "We have no interest in keeping secrets about a potential threat. Quite the opposite. We want everyone looking at this." "And the Prometheus," Veth said. "The dark ship. There are many questions about its capabilities." Carolyn smiled. It was a small smile, and it told Veth very little. "The Prometheus is an Earth vessel," she said. "Its specifications are Earth's to share, or not share as we see fit, in accordance with the same rules that govern any member species' military technology." That was not a yes. It was also not a no. Veth filed it away. While the diplomats talked, the scientists worked. The 7 captured needle ships were brought to a secure facility in the Cathara system. The humans insisted on this, and the Velthari agreed quickly, both because they wanted to know what had hit them, and because they trusted the humans to do the analysis properly, which was a level of trust they had extended to very few species in a very short time. The needle ships had no visible crew, but they were not empty. They had organic components, things that were partly biological and partly not, integrated into their systems in ways that took the research team several days to even begin to map. The research team was human, and Velthari and Dravathi, and they argued constantly about methodology, which the humans seemed to find energizing, and which the Velthari found exhausting, but the arguments produced results. What the results said, after the first week, was that the needle ships came from somewhere a long way away, somewhere that the Union had no data on, somewhere that had been developing technology along lines that were parallel to Union technology in some ways, and completely alien in others. What the results also said was that the needle ships had been scouting. They had not been attacking randomly. They had been looking at the Cathara system specifically, and before Cathara, they had been looking at 3 other systems that the researchers could identify from the navigation data. The Velthari saw this and became very still in the way that meant they were concerned. The humans saw it and became very active in the way that meant something was being decided. Admiral Ose Mensa, reviewing the research data from the carrier Relentless in the Cathara system, spent one long evening looking at the star map and the navigation data and the pattern of the scouting missions. She had a glass of water on her desk. She did not drink it. She just looked at the map. Her aide, a young officer named Lieutenant Sio, came in at some point and asked if she needed anything. "Pull up our strategic reserve deployments," she said, "and the Prometheus's readiness report, and get me a channel to Earth Command whenever they're available." "Yes, Admiral. Is everything—" "The needle ships weren't looking at us randomly," she said. "The pattern of their scouting suggests they were mapping defensible positions, systems they could use as staging grounds." She looked at the map. They weren't just attacking, they were planning. Sio looked at the map too. He was young, but he was smart. He understood what he was looking at. "You think there are more of them," he said. "I think there are a lot more of them," she said. "And I think the one we let go has already told them what happened here. Which means we have a window to be ready before whatever comes next." She finally picked up the water glass and drank from it. "Get me Earth Command," she said again. "And wake up the Prometheus crew. They've had enough rest." The second wave came 43 days after the first. It came not to Cathara, but to 3 systems at once: Pelosi, Dravath Prime, and the outer colony stations of Velthari space, called the Chain. They hit simultaneously, perfectly coordinated, which meant they had communications and planning capability well beyond what the first encounter had suggested. They came with more ships this time, not needle ships alone. The needle ships were there, but there were also larger vessels, slower and heavier, that the Union had not seen before. The attack on Pelosi was the one that scared people the most, because Pelosi was the homeworld of the Pelosians, and it had been 1,000 years since anyone had attacked a homeworld directly. The Pelosian defense grid was good. It held for 11 hours. Admiral Ose Mensa had not been idle in the 43 days between the first encounter and the second. She had been preparing. But preparing for 3 simultaneous attacks on targets spread across Union space was a different problem from preparing for one fight in one system, and even she, with all her planning and all her contingencies, could not be everywhere at once. She split what she had. The Relentless went to Dravath Prime with 8 destroyers and a cruiser group. She sent the Prometheus and a different set of ships to the Chain. She went to Pelosi herself, on the heavy cruiser Immovable, with the best of what remained. She didn't get to Pelosi in time to stop the damage, but she got there before the damage became destruction. The Pelosian defense grid had held 11 hours and was failing in several places when the Immovable dropped out of FTL travel with its escort group and immediately started fighting. The battle over Pelosi lasted 18 hours. It was nothing like the clean, fast engagement at Cathara. This was close and hard and ugly. Ships burned. Debris filled the space above the planet like a new ring. The heavy attackers that the Union had not seen before turned out to be siege vessels. They did not move fast, but they hit with a power that was unlike anything the Union's defensive doctrine had been designed to handle. One of them aimed at the Immovable for 4 hours, and the Immovable just kept fighting back. When the battle was over, and it ended not with a clean finish, but with the attackers pulling back, not retreating in panic, but withdrawing in order, which was somehow worse, Pelosi was safe, but not unharmed. The outer orbital stations were gone. The northern continent had suffered significant damage from debris that had made it through the defensive net. The death toll was in the thousands. Admiral Ose Mensa stood on the Immovable's bridge and looked at the damage reports and did not say anything for a long time. The battles at Dravath Prime and the Chain had gone differently. At Dravath Prime, the Relentless group had arrived early enough to meet the attackers before they reached the planet, and the engagement had stayed in open space, which was better for the defenders. The Dravathi had lost 2 of their own military vessels, and the Relentless had taken heavy damage, but the attackers had been driven off with 6 of their ships destroyed. The chain was where it got strange. Captain Hideo Nakamura, of the Prometheus, had been a naval officer for 22 years. He was not an emotional person, or rather he had learned over 22 years to keep his emotions somewhere they did not affect his thinking during combat. He was thorough and quiet, and very, very patient, and he had a gift for understanding what his opponent was going to do before they did it. He had reviewed the needle ship tactics from the Cathara battle 600 times in 43 days. He had reviewed the navigation data from the captured vessels. He had talked to every crew member who had boarded the needle ships. He had studied the organic components, the integrated biology and technology that the research team was still trying to fully understand. He thought he knew something about them that no one else did yet. When the attackers arrived at the chain, 14 needle ships and 4 heavy vessels, Nakamura did not fight them the way they expected to be fought. He did not meet them head-on. He did not fall back and wait. He did something that his escort ship's captains described later as absolutely terrifying to watch from the outside, and which the data recorders showed was calculated to the second. He went through them. The Prometheus moved through the attacking formation at a speed that should not have been possible for a vessel its size. As it moved, it deployed something the crew called the harvest net, the same field technology that had stopped 2 needle ships at Cathara, refined in 43 days of hard work by the Prometheus's engineering team. It deployed it across the entire formation at once. Not all the ships were caught. The technology had limits. 4 needle ships and 1 heavy vessel got free and turned to fight. The remaining 10 ships were held, not destroyed, held, in the net field, pinned in space while the Prometheus came around and the escort ships picked them apart at leisure. The 4 free needle ships attacked. They hit the Prometheus with everything they had. The Prometheus took damage, real damage, structural damage. 3 of its secondary systems went offline, and 1 of its boarding bays was destroyed. But it did not stop moving, and its crew did not stop working. Nakamura put the Prometheus between the remaining free attacker ships and the chain stations. He put it there and kept it there for 6 hours while the escort ships dealt with the others, taking hits, absorbing damage, answering every strike with one of its own. The chain stations were not touched. When the last attacking vessel had been disabled or destroyed, Nakamura sat in his command chair on the Prometheus's bridge and did an inventory of what his ship had lost. He was calm about it, as he was calm about everything, but the list was long, and some of the things on it were hard to look at. "Captain," his first officer said, "we have a communication from Admiral Ose Mensa. Put it through." The Admiral's voice was tired but steady. "Nakamura, your status." "Prometheus is operational," he said. "We'll need significant repairs before the next engagement, but we're operational. The chain is intact. We captured 9 of their vessels." A pause. "9, Nakamura. That's extraordinary." "The harvest net performed better than I expected at scale," he said. "The engineering team did good work. We should share the refined specifications with the fleet immediately." "Agreed. How's your crew?" He looked around the bridge. His people were tired, and some of them were injured, and all of them had been awake for 20 hours straight, and every one of them was still at their station and still working. "They're fine," he said. "They're doing fine." He was not exaggerating. He was not performing calm for the Admiral. He meant it. That was another thing about humans that the rest of the galaxy was still learning: the stress response. In most species, prolonged combat and danger led to a degradation of function. Cognitive sharpness declined. Decision-making slowed. The organism, built for safety, tried to escape the unsafe situation in any way it could, including simply shutting down. Humans were built differently. Not all humans. Not in all situations. And not without cost. The cost came later. In the quiet. In the weight that soldiers carried afterward. But during the crisis itself, something happened in humans that did not happen in most species. The stress response that should have impaired them instead, in the right circumstances, sharpened them, focused them, made them faster and clearer and more creative, not less. Evolution on a death world had done that. 4 billion years of predators and disasters and diseases had built a species that, at the right kind of threat level, got better instead of worse. The Union was beginning to understand this in a way that was not theoretical anymore. At Pelosi, at Drevath Prime, at the Chain, everywhere the humans had fought, the after-action data told the same story. The longer the engagement lasted, the better the human commanders and crews performed. The attackers, whoever they were, did not seem to have prepared for this. Their tactics assumed that sustained pressure would wear down their opponents. It worked on every species they had encountered before. It did not work on humans. In the quiet after the 3 battles, in the brief space before whatever came next, the Union held an emergency council session. Representatives from every species came or sent proxies. The Velthari came in person. The Pelosians came in person, which was notable given what had just happened to their homeworld. Ambassador Carolyn Adeyemi represented Earth. The discussion was long, and at times very difficult. There were species that were frightened, not just of the attackers, but of what they were seeing from humanity. There were old worries being spoken aloud that had been whispered for 40 years. A species from a death world. A species that fought like this, that had planned like this, that had ships like the Prometheus. What did it mean for the Union to have such a species as a member? What did it mean for the balance of power? Carolyn sat through these discussions with the patience that had made her a good diplomat for 30 years. She answered questions when they were asked. She did not defend and she did not deflect. She was honest. "You are asking if we are dangerous," she said at one point to the room at large. "The answer is yes. You knew that when you admitted us. We told you. Our history is right there in our records. You had access to all of it." She looked around the council chamber. "What you are really asking, I think, is whether we are dangerous to you, whether we will use what we are for our own benefit, at your expense." She let that sit for a moment. "We are in a war," she said. "We did not start it. You did not start it. Something out there started it, and we are all in it together. And the question of whether to trust us is being answered right now, not by me, but by the people we sent. Admiral Osei Mensa is in orbit above your homeworld, Ambassador Veth. Captain Nakamura's ship is between the chain stations and open space. What we are is being demonstrated. I can't add anything to that." The room was quiet. It was the Velthari ambassador who spoke next. He was old, older than Carolyn by 100 years, and he spoke slowly. "Humanity came when we called," he said. "Without conditions, without waiting for guarantees. They came." He paused. "I have been in this council for 60 years. I have never seen that before." Nobody had an argument against that. They found the origin point 3 months after the second wave. It was the Prometheus that found it, which surprised no one anymore. Captain Nakamura had been following the trail in the navigation data from the captured needle ships, working with a joint team of human, Velthari, and Dravathi analysts, and they had been narrowing down the coordinates for weeks. When they finally had something solid, Nakamura brought it to Admiral Osei Mensa, who brought it to the Union Council, and there was a very long and very serious discussion about what to do with the information. The discussion had 2 camps. One camp said, "We have their position. We go there. We end this before the 3rd wave comes, before more worlds are hit, before more people die. We take the fight to them, and we make it clear that what they started cannot be finished." The other camp said, "We do not know enough. We do not know their full strength. We do not know their motivations. We do not know if there are more of them beyond the origin point, or if the origin point is just one outpost of something much larger. Going in without more information could turn a manageable war into an unmanageable one." Admiral Osei Mensa sat through the discussion and listened carefully, and then said what she thought, which was, both camps were right, and the answer was to do both things at once. She sent the diplomats first. This surprised everyone. She sent Commander Esha, because Esha had been there from the beginning and was the best the Union had at talking to things that didn't obviously want to be talked to. She sent a Velthari diplomat named Treasurer Han, who was quiet and very smart, and who had the particular Velthari quality of being able to sit in silence for as long as was required without becoming uncomfortable. She sent a human linguist named Dr. Amara Okonkwo, who had spent 15 years studying unknown language structures and who had been working on the needle ship data since the first week after Cathara. She sent them in the calm waters, which was Esha's ship and which was unarmed, and clearly unarmed, and had been fitted with as many translation systems as it could carry. And she sent the fleet behind them, far enough back to not be immediately visible on basic sensors, close enough to arrive in under an hour if needed. "You're using us as bait," Esha said, when the Admiral explained the plan. "I'm using you as a door," the Admiral said. "There's a difference. If they let you in, you talk. If they don't let you in, we find out fast enough to respond. And if they just destroy us when we arrive, then we know they're not interested in any outcome except war, and we act accordingly." The Admiral was not casual about this. Esha could see that she was not casual about it. "I don't want to lose you, Esha. I'm asking you to take a real risk. But I think there's a chance, not a certainty, but a chance, that whoever built those ships has more going on than pure aggression. Their scouting was too careful. Their targeting was too specific. Things that are purely aggressive don't scout." Esha thought about this for a long time. Then she said yes. The journey to the origin coordinates took 9 days. The calm waters traveled alone for most of it, the fleet hanging back at a distance that felt very large and very small at the same time. Esha spent the 9 days working with Dr. Okonkwo on what they had learned from the needle ship data. Not just the navigation and tactical information, but the communication fragments they had pulled from the ship's memory systems. Partial signals, partial records, things that were almost language, and were slowly becoming more understandable. What they were becoming understandable as was not what anyone had expected. "They're not coming to conquer," Dr. Okonkwo said, on the 7th day, with the particular careful tone she used when she wasn't completely certain but was fairly certain. "The communication patterns, the context as far as I can decode the context. It's not conquest language. It's not subjugation language. It's," she paused, "it's scouting language, assessment language, the kind of thing you'd say if you were trying to determine whether a region was safe." "Safe for whom?" Esha asked. "For whoever sent them," Dr. Okonkwo said. "I think, and this is a working theory, not a conclusion, I think they're running from something, or they were, or they have been for a very long time, and the Union space is in the direction they need to go." Esha sat with this for a while, running from something, the needle ships, the attacks, the killed Velthari crew members and the destroyed stations, and the scars on Pelosi's surface, all of it done by a species that was not attacking out of aggression, or hunger, or conquest, but out of fear and desperation. It did not make her any less angry about the people who had died, but it changed the shape of the problem. She reported this to Admiral Osei Mensah. The Admiral was quiet for a long time after hearing it. "Does this change your recommendation for the fleet's posture?" Esha asked. "No," the Admiral said, "but it changes what I'm hoping for. Keep going. Tell me what you find." On the 9th day, the calm waters arrived at the origin point. It was a system of 6 planets around a dim orange star, and it was full of ships. Hundreds of ships, some like the needle ships, and some like the heavy vessels, and some that were different again, shapes and sizes that the calm waters sensors had never seen. They were not arranged in a military formation. They were arranged the way that a city was arranged, close together, connected by smaller craft moving between them, busy in the way that a place with people living in it is busy. The calm waters entered the system slowly and broadcast its non-combat status on every frequency it had. It broadcast the partial language fragments that Dr. Okonkwo had been working on, formatted as clearly as she could manage, as a message of peaceful intent. It broadcast on and waited. For 2 hours, nothing responded. Then something came toward them. A single vessel, smaller than the needle ships, moving slowly. It stopped at a distance that felt deliberately non-threatening. A signal came from it. Not the needle ship frequencies. Something different, cleaner. Dr. Okonkwo bent over her instruments and worked faster than Esha had seen her work yet. "They're talking," she said. "They're actually talking. Give me time." Esha gave her time. She also, quietly, sent a signal back to the fleet. "Status update. In contact. Hold position. Do not approach unless signaled." It took 4 days. 4 days of slow, careful, exhausting communication. Dr. Okonkwo working with 2 colleagues through shifts. the specialists on both sides building understanding piece by piece, the way you build a bridge, not all at once but beam by beam. The calm waters did not move. The vessel that had come to meet them did not move. Other ships in the system moved around them and watched. What Dr. Okonkwo assembled in the end was not a complete picture. It was the outline of one. But the outline was enough. The species that had built the needle ships called themselves, approximately translated, the Vithani. They had been traveling for 200 years. They had come from a part of the galaxy that no Union species had charted, and they had been pushed out of it by something that Dr. Okonkwo's translation work could only describe as a sweeping darkness, a force or entity or disaster that had consumed their home space and was still moving, slowly, in their direction. They had been scouting Union space because they needed somewhere to go. They had attacked the Velthari and the others because, and this was the part that Esha found hardest to sit with, they had not known the Union was a Union. They had assumed, based on the technology levels they observed and the patterns of their own experience, that the different species they found were competing powers, not allied ones. They had been trying to clear a path through what they thought was contested territory. They had not expected anyone to respond the way the humans had. "What do they say about us?" Esha asked Dr. Okonkwo, on the fourth day, when the picture was becoming clearer. Dr. Okonkwo thought about how to phrase it. "They have a word for us," she said. "For humanity specifically. I'm not sure I'm translating it exactly, but the closest I can get is," she paused, "the ones who arrived." "That's not very descriptive," Esha said. "No," Dr. Okonkwo agreed, "but the context around it is. When they use it, the context says, the ones who came when it was not their fight. The ones who came anyway. The ones who, I think this part is important, the ones who came without knowing if they could win." Esha was quiet for a moment. "They think that's notable," she said, "coming without knowing if you could win. Every other power they've encountered has calculated the odds first," Dr. Okonkwo said. "The Vithani are very good at calculating odds. They assumed everyone was. Then a species showed up that apparently doesn't operate that way. It took 3 weeks to negotiate the initial framework. Esha and Treasurer Han and Dr. Okonkwo worked around the clock, sleeping in shifts, sustained by what Esha privately suspected was an alarming amount of human coffee that she had borrowed from the supply locker. Admiral Ose Mensa kept the fleet at its holding position, patient and ready, and received daily reports, and did not push. The framework was not peace. Peace was something that would take years to build, and there was a lot to account for. The dead on both sides, the damaged worlds, the broken trust that had to be earned back slowly. The framework was a beginning, a ceasefire, a set of channels through which talking could continue, a commitment from the Vithani to share everything they knew about what was pursuing them, so that the Union could evaluate whether it posed a threat to Union space as well. That last part changed the conversation in ways that Esha had not fully anticipated. Because what was pursuing the Vithani was large, very large, and it was moving. When Admiral Ose Mensa received the full data package about what the Vithani were running from, she sat in her cabin on the immovable for a long time and looked at it. Then she called Earth Command and sent the data and said, "We're going to need more ships, and we're going to need to think differently about the next few years." She also sent a message to the Union Council, through Ambassador Adeyemi, that was short and direct. The war with the Vithani was over. The reason for the war had been a misunderstanding compounded by fear, and the path forward was together, not against each other. The Vithani needed a home. The Union had space. The shape of that arrangement would take time to work out, but the direction was clear. And there was something coming from the dark that neither the Union nor the Vithani could face alone. The message from the Council came back in 3 days. The vote was not unanimous. Nothing in the Union was ever unanimous. But it was clear. Negotiations would continue. The Vithani would be granted provisional status while the details were worked out. The data about the approaching threat would be shared and analyzed. The Velthari ambassador, voting in favor, attached a note to his vote that Ambassador Adeyemi read twice and then forwarded to Admiral Ose Mensa. It said, "We called for help. The humans came. Then the humans did something more important than fight. They made it so the fight did not have to continue. We asked for defenders, and we received more than defenders. We are grateful." The Admiral received the note in her cabin, and read it, and then looked out the viewport at the stars for a while. Commander Esha, when the framework was signed and the calm waters finally pointed its bow back toward Union space, sat in her command chair and looked at the star that marked the Vithani fleet behind her, and thought about a lot of things. She thought about the signal she had sent in desperation, not because she thought it would help, but because she was afraid and wanted people to know. She thought about the moment when the human fleet had appeared on her sensors, moving at speeds that her instruments said were impossible. She thought about Admiral Ose Mensa's voice, calm and steady and certain. "We received your signal. We are coming." She had been a diplomat for 30 years. She had seen things that would have seemed impossible before she saw them. She had learned not to be surprised by much, but she was surprised by this, not by the fighting. She had come to understand, over the past months, that the fighting was the part that made sense, given where humans came from and what their world had made them. The fighting was the part that other species could categorize and evaluate and weigh. A Deathworld species. Of course they can fight. Of course they came prepared. What surprised her was the other part, the part after the fighting. The 4 days of slow, patient communication, the framework, the ceasefire, the way Admiral Ose Mensa had held the fleet back and waited, and trusted Esha and Dr. Okonkwo to build something with words instead of weapons. She had not expected that from humanity. Not because she had thought badly of them, but because fighting and diplomacy were, in her experience, things that different kinds of people did. You were either one or the other. You were either the kind of species that came out of a hard world and hit hard, or you were the kind of species that sat down and talked things through. Humans were both, completely and without apparent contradiction. They had come to fight, and they had stayed to build peace. They had hit back hard, and then they had opened a door. She did not have a word in her language for what that was. She suspected that in time the Union would develop one. The calm waters traveled home through the dark, through the stars, through the long quiet of deep space. Ahead of it, far ahead, was the Union, all its many species, and all its many complications, and the long work that was ahead of them all. Behind it was the Vithani fleet, which was also, slowly and carefully, and with a lot still left to figure out, beginning to travel toward a new home. And somewhere in the dark between the stars, something large and patient was moving in their direction, and everyone now knew it, and everyone was going to have to face it together. But that was later. That was the next thing. For now, the signal had been answered. The crisis had been met. The ones who arrived had arrived. The galaxy had seen what came when humanity was called, and the galaxy would not forget it.